Good morning. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, I guess, wherever you are. Thank you very much for joining me today for our monthly office hours. If you wouldn't mind, if you're in the chat, you're joining me today, if you wouldn't just give me a little bit of a reaction, let me know that you can both see and hear me, both see my camera and stuff. You should also see the slides, the animation off to the right. That would just let me know that everything is working and that we're all good. So we'd greatly appreciate that if you don't mind. Just give me that little bit of feedback. This is going to be an interesting one today. We've got some breaking news that I guess isn't too breaking. Today is Tuesday, June the 17th. We had an announcement that came out last Friday, June the 13th, which is, well, we'll get to that. And I'm sure if you've been paying a little bit of attention on social media, you may have seen a few people talking about this. I've seen it come up on Reddit. I've seen it come up on a couple times on LinkedIn. It's going to be the topic of my podcast tomorrow with Julie Turner. So let's go ahead and let's dive in because I got a handful of things I want to share with you. I got plenty of time to be able to answer questions. I am going to try and make sure that we get through all of the news with this. So I did not receive any questions ahead of time. So if you have a question, please feel free to go ahead and post your question to the office hours or to the chat, the live chat here, and I'll be more than happy to tackle that as they come in. If you are in my community, the Voitanos Learn community, as one of my students, you know that there is a spot in there for the office hours. Once we start the office hours, please just make sure that you use the chat here in the YouTube live stream. Just easier to keep track of one spot there. So what are we going to cover? Well, really first, let's just kind of go over an overview on what this whole thing is for those of you who are new. So very quickly, my name is Andrew Connell. I'm your host for these monthly office hours. I hold these generally on the second or third Tuesday of the month. Already got the one for next month already set up as well. And I'd like to cover just any questions that you may have, as well as some of the top news that I think that full stack developers in the Microsoft 365 ecosystem need to be aware of, and then also answer your questions. So really quick, a little bit about me. I'm a longtime developer, web developer, full stack developer in what we now call the Microsoft 365 development ecosystem, but I go all the way back 20 plus years to the original SharePoint versions, SharePoint portal server. I do a lot of work with both SharePoint, SharePoint Framework. I've got the industry leading class on that for developers. Do a lot of work with Microsoft Teams app development, Azure, using Azure resources as needed to facilitate these different solutions that I create for my customers as well. And then also done some work with SharePoint Embedded and Microsoft 365 Copilot for creating custom agents with that. So I've got some fun stuff to talk about with that one as well at the end. I'm a 20 plus year Microsoft MVP. I've been an MVP ever since 2004, 2005, something like that. You can't really see it, I guess, with the way I've got the clip here, but it's like you can see a little bit of the award back there with all the little hockey pucks and everything on them of the different years. I also have a company called Voitanos. It's where I focus on really delivering education and news updates and information and guidance around Microsoft 365 development. So I've got self-paced courses. I've got live workshops. Share a little bit about that in just a minute. And I do also multi-week accelerators as well. And then what's new that I share with you this month is I've rejoined the podcasting game. So I've got a podcast that I run now with my co-host, Julie Turner, who is a fellow M365 developer and also a fellow MVP. It's called Code, Deploy, Go Live, and it's for full stack developers. It is not specific to Microsoft 365 or Microsoft Azure, although, we understand who our audience is, and so there'll be a significant number of people who are a significant amount of content that will be kind of gated in that direction. But if you were a fan of my previous podcast, the Microsoft Cloud Show, you can think of this as a very similar format to that. I guess I traded in and upgraded CJ for Julie. Don't tell CJ that, although it's a joke. CJ was awesome. He just isn't working in the same space. And so it doesn't really make sense for him to do the same kind of thing that we're doing. And so anyway, this is a fun show. We've got 7 episodes that are live. We got one that's coming out tomorrow about I think it's the first thing we're going to talk about, or the second thing we're going to talk about today. The big breaking news thing will be a big piece there. All right. So let's get on that. Oh, that podcast, you can search for Code Deploy Go Live. The website is codedeploygo.live. It's available on like everywhere you listen to podcasts, all the podcatchers. So Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Music, you name it. It's all out there. Overcast. There's an audio feed. It's also available as a video feed. We have a separate YouTube channel for it as well, where you can actually get the show. All right. So if you like it video, cool. If you like it audio, cool. All right. So how does this work? For those of you who are new with me, this office hours, I cover a couple different topics. I'm going to focus on SharePoint Framework, Teams, Copilot, and then I'm going to answer your questions if you have any questions. Happy to do a discussion. We'll probably do questions as we go through, but if you have a question that something you really want to get addressed, post it in the chat. I'll keep an eye out for it in the chat. I will to be able to answer those when they come across. In the future, though, if you are a student of one of my courses, you've got access to Voitanos Learn, which is where you can get like the latest and greatest stuff from me. That's where all of it's only available to all of my students and my courses. We've got an events page on there, and on the events page, all of these office hours are listed where you can post your question ahead of time and kind of skip the line and get to the very front to get your questions answered. But nobody did it this month. That's fine. We've got plenty of stuff to cover though. So let's go ahead and dive in. Now, first thing we cover, let's talk about SharePoint Framework. So quick state of the union here. The current version of the SharePoint Framework is version 1.21.1. The big thing with that is it was really just like a maintenance release, or kind of maybe think about it more as Microsoft going, oh my God, the version of Node that we support is getting ready to be outdated and no longer in support, and companies are flipping out. We better upgrade. So the SharePoint Framework today, version 1.21.1, now only supports Node version 22, long-term support, the LTS version. So it only supports Node.js version 22. They did also bump the version of TypeScript up from, I believe it was 4.7.4, up to version 5.3. Now that's it. That's really everything that's there. You see something I have listed here said they added support for flexible layouts, because I get people asking me this question a lot. Wait a minute, I thought that was one of the other things that was added to the SharePoint Framework. No. That is something that you could use flexible layouts. You could use that for like an SPFx version 1.0 version. Why is that? Because all it is just a change inside of your manifest. It has nothing to do with the actual version of the SharePoint Framework. Flexible layouts were added very recently to SharePoint Online, but it's supported really in every version, because all it is just a metadata thing that's in the manifest of your component. So it's not really as part of this release, although they love to pack that kind of stuff in there. The next version of the SharePoint Framework is version 1.22. Now, all I can say, there's nothing available to this yet, and they haven't shared much about this. And what they have shared, I would always discount, because it seems that whenever they do one of these previews, stuff always changes. So I wouldn't trust I don't trust the stuff that when they say what's coming in the next version, when they talk about it on those, the P&P bi-weekly calls, I wouldn't trust that stuff. I wouldn't trust it until you actually see the release. But I will tell you that what I do know about this, and I can't go into detail right now, is that there's something pretty big that's going to change here. And it's something you're going to want to be aware of. It is not something you're going to have to rush and upgrade to this version to take advantage of it. It may be one of those things that you kind of wait to decide to adopt this for your new projects going forward. So I can't get into any detail with that. All I can just tell you is keep an eye out for it. I will definitely cover it when it comes out. So I'm working with Microsoft on some of that stuff right now. So just keep an eye out for it. Okay, now, first thing that I want to cover is something that has been in the Message Center, in the SharePoint admin, or in the Microsoft 365 Message Center, but they have not really spoken too much about it. This is what Microsoft is doing is they're rolling out CSP support in SharePoint Online. So what content security policy is now, over on the right-hand side, I got a couple links in here for you just to kind of touch on this. The QR code is going to take you to the link that you see there at the top. Now that is a link to an article that I published that really walks through what is this and how is it going to impact me and just all the details for an article that I have that's posted. The link at the bottom is for a discussion item that I've added that is basically saying, hey, look, Microsoft, cool, I'm glad you're doing this, but quite frankly, what you're doing, you're dropping the ball on a couple spots. I'm going to have something that's going to address one of these challenges that we have, but that I talk about in the article. But frankly, there's 3 things that I think they've dropped the ball on with this. So I'll touch on those in just a minute. So first of all, what is this? So this is rolling out right now. If you look at the message center, it's going to tell you, or it sure does imply that it's rolled out across the world already. That's not the case. I still have 2 tenants of mine that don't have it. Right now, just to be clear, what is content security policy? This is a web thing. This has nothing to do with SharePoint. What content security policy does is that it is when a browser requests a page from a web server, the web server responds with that page, right? And then that page references a whole bunch of other resources it needs, like images, CSS, script files, etc. Part of the response that it gets is a bunch of HTTP headers, and some of those headers can include instructions that are related to CSP. What that does is that tells the browser what domains are allowed or not allowed to be loaded for this page by the browser. So if the page says, I want to load a script file from some remote URL, if it's not listed as the allowed script, as an allowed script in the CSP policy or in the content, in the CS policy, it's kind of weird in the CSP, in the CSP, then the browser will not load it and it will just throw an error and probably your solution will break. So that's just how it works in the web. Now, what Microsoft is doing now is they are implementing CSP support in SharePoint Online. And by default, the only URLs that the browser will load a script for or from are those where the script is originating from, let's just call it SharePoint Online. There's a whole list of a whole bunch of them, right? And I have them all listed here in my article. So if I go, let me jump over to my article here. And if you scroll down, I will show you. So here's a list right here of all of the scripts sources where things are allowed to be pulled from. So you'll see a bunch of stuff from like office.net. There's static content from Microsoft. There's stuff SharePointOnline.com. There's I think one of them is like star.sharepointonline.com, but it will also include the current URL for the current SharePoint site. So it'll always go through and include content from the same site that we're on. And so what that means is that if you have your bundle is deployed as part of your package, it'll go inside the client-side scripts library in the current site. It'll load just fine. So it's not going to affect any of those. But if you package your bundle and you keep the bundle outside of the package that's being deployed to SharePoint and you manually deploy it to some other CDN, you're going to have to make sure that this file, this script reference, is going to be referenced inside of your is going to be referenced in a special place inside the SharePoint Admin Center, all right? So this special place, and I talk about it in this article, there's a special place here called the Trusted Script Sources. So this is in the SharePoint Admin Center, and you'll find it under Advanced, and go to Script Sources, and it takes you to this page. That's my first complaint. Trusted Script Sources is a stupid name for this that Microsoft has chosen because, quite frankly, nobody's going to be looking for Trusted Script Sources. That's not a thing with CSP. People are going to be looking for CSP configuration. So frankly, this should say CSP config or CSP management or just content security policy. Stupid name that they've chosen here. So that's my first bit of feedback. What happens is that when you go to, in order for SharePoint Online to load your external script files, you're going to have this URL listed here. Now, by default, it will automatically add it. So you'll see there'll be a new thing when you go to, let me see, where's that screenshot I have? I've got it somewhere. Hold on one sec. Let me find that. Where is that? Okay, this is kind of what it looks like. You know when you upload a solution to an app package and you're, well, actually this isn't right. That's not the right one. Let's go up to the very top. There it is. So now when you go to upload a solution to SharePoint Online to an app package, you're going to see if you're using if you're putting your JavaScript file, your bundle, in a separate location, like a CDN that you manage, and you've done that by a change to the right manifest file, then when you upload it, it will tell you here that it'll tell the admin, the administrator, this app is going to get data from this location right here. Okay. When you click enable app, it will automatically add it to the trusted script sources. You can also add your own references here. And what that does is that link right there will be added in addition to all the other out of the box links that are in the default policy. Now, what happens if you don't put this here? What Microsoft is doing right now, or what we're going to be doing going forward as well, let me scroll down here, is you will see if you have a violation, it will have something inside of the browser's console that will basically say, I refuse to load this script, and it'll give you a reference to the script that it's trying to load because it violates the CSP, okay? If I scroll down a little bit farther, this right here is just me taking out all the line breaks, make it easier to see. Or sorry, adding line breaks to make it easier to read. In addition, if you're using Purview, it'll also log a hit in the audit log for the violated content security policy. That's the friendly name. The unfriendly name is just content security or violated content security policy. And you'll see that when you go to the actual item, right here, it'll tell you what the violation was. Thought it was going to be listed in here somewhere. It is listed. I just don't have it in my screenshot. But you'll see there's the page where the violation happened, and then there's the script that actually triggered the violation. Okay, so you can go through and you can see this stuff. Now today, when they roll this out, this is only in reporting mode only. So it is going to show up in Purview and it's going to show up in the console, but it is not going to block your script from loading. As I say on the slide here, it is not going to be enforced until later this year in Q4, okay? So what you want to do is you want to start making sure that you're checking Purview, or you're just checking your projects and making sure that stuff is going to be okay. You are going to want to make sure that you also add any links that you need to your trusted script sources, stupid page, to make sure that those scripts will work. Now, I've got some complaints about how this works. First of all, what about if you're using a script file from a CDN that lives somewhere else? Well, a CDN. So like JS deliver or something like that. And you've put that inside of the config, config/json. The config folder /json.config. That's where we can have the externals link, right? So I have that here in my slides. Let's go over here, or in my article. So first of all, that's my first thing. Rename the trusted script sources. Stupid name. Second of all, automatically detect. So you know here where you have like the code, the config.json file, if I want to reference like jQuery from some external CDN, I would use this externals. Well, those aren't picked up by automatically. So you're going to have to manually go add those, and they're not going to show up in that list on that page when you upload those guys. So to me, that's like big miss, Microsoft. You need to fix that. Now I have a way to fix this. A guy has a comment on my blog, at the bottom of my blog, where he's like, "Hey, I found out that if you do this after you do a bundle before you do the packaging, then you can get it in there." Cool. I've got a solution that's going to make that a little more automated. If you keep an eye on my blog, I will have an article out that shows you how to do that with some easy code that you can go through and add. The other thing that I don't like about, so then hopefully then what it'll show is that, what I really want is I really want this to be able to show up. So I get a list of all of the places where things are going to be pulled from. That's what I would expect to see as an administrator. The other thing that I would like to see is that, quite frankly, if you're going to go through and you're going to have this set up, you should follow the exact same process that you do for requesting permissions. So down here, like in our app package, You know, we can list out like the permissions that we want to add, and they're only permission requests. An administrator then has to approve it. We should be doing the exact same setup with this. These things should be requests. They should not automatically be added. Now, the argument against that is that, well, but if you don't approve the request, then the solution's not going to work. Guess what? Same thing for a permission, right? So I think we should be doing the exact same thing that we're doing with API permissions. And if you agree with me or disagree with me, whatever, I've submitted all of these as requests inside of this link at the bottom here for this discussion item of 10,302. Comment on that guy. Let me know what you think, or leave a comment on mine. Microsoft, I'm sure, is looking at those discussions, and the more feedback we give them before this rolls out, before this is starting to be enforced, would make our lives a lot easier. I see Savvy's got a question. What happens with the existing solutions? Can they break because of this upcoming feature? If the script reference is not already allowed, or is this only going to affect newly uploaded app packages? No, this affects everything. This affects everything. You need to go through and take stock of what you have, and you need to see if these findings are showing up. This is really crappy how this is rolled out, and that they're not being more visible with this. Quite frankly, this has been the message center for a little while, and Microsoft had me write the document in the SharePoint Framework developer docs about this, and I didn't see people really talking about it, or everybody was really surprised about it until I wrote my article about this a week or two ago. So just make sure you pay attention to this guy. Okay, next thing is like, this is Microsoft trying to bury the news and releasing this announcement on Friday the 13th last week. SPFx field customizers have now been deprecated, right? So they announced this last week. I've got the message center entry listed right here that you can take a look at. This is going to be the topic of episode 8 of the Code Deploy Go Live podcast that Julie Turner and I do. It will be out tomorrow. What they're doing is they're basically just killing field customizers. They're like, sorry, we're not going to use them anymore. They will be retired fully, and they will stop working next year after June 30th, 2026. So at that time, they will no longer load on the page, and the data in the column, the way how the data in the column is normally rendered is what's going to be rendered however the underlying column in the list normally renders its content, whether it's a date or a link or whatever. It'll be rendered the normal way as it normally does. So we are losing a lot of functionality here. Sorry, you've lost all of your all of your business logic that you can have here, your conditional business logic, or being able to do anything like kind of really custom, like putting a React control in there or something like that I've seen a lot of people do. Microsoft's guidance is use the declarative formatting, the JSON formatting, or use a Power App to go through and to customize how your list works. Look, you want my take on it? This is crap. This is a really stupid decision on their part. This is a flat out loss in functionality. Power Apps and declarative formatting, you can't do custom business logic in those. Not only that, declarative formatting, show me how you're supposed to do that in a reliable rollout way for a true enterprise to have this done across, like if you had one column that was being done, you wanted this rolled out across all columns throughout your entire tenant for that one column type, like KPIs or Sparkline or something like that. Good luck. You can't. It's not easy to do. There's no mass way to do this. That's what the nice thing was about the SharePoint framework and being able to deploy this as like an app customizer. So this is, quite frankly, I think Microsoft has made a stupid decision with this. And I would encourage you to really voice your opinion on this to Microsoft. I'm going to have an article out about this, hopefully later today. This one snuck under the radar. Like I woke up yesterday morning and Julie and I were getting ready to record our podcast yesterday. And all of a sudden I looked at the message center and I was like, hey, we were going to talk about this. I think we got something else we should talk about. And then as we're going through and like doing our pre-show notes, we start getting messages from everybody else noticing this. So stupid decision by Microsoft. Really does kind of make you think about like, should I be doing anything serious with the SharePoint framework? Because like they're just the way they're canceling stuff left and right. This is just really stupid. This is just really stupid in my mind. So if you agree with me, or I'm curious, if you agree with me or disagree, let me know. Drop it in the chat. Tell me what you think about this. Tell me what you think about this reaction. If you're watching the recording of this, drop a comment below and let me know. I will post a link to my article on this once it's live. Okay, next thing. Let's switch over to Teams. That's the SharePoint Framework stuff. Let's switch over to Teams for a bit. I talked a little bit about this in our last office hours. At Build 2025 in early May, Microsoft renamed the tool that we use to create custom Teams solutions. So tabs, message extensions, bots, dialogues, agents for Copilot, you name it. They renamed it from the Teams Toolkit to the Microsoft 365 Agents Toolkit. So it's now referred to as ATK. Even though it's called the Agents Toolkit, you still use it to build Teams apps. You still use it to build Office add-ins. Yet again, it's a stupid name for this thing. I put a poll up on LinkedIn. I asked the people at Microsoft and like, no, we think it's a great name. And I'm like, nobody's going to agree with you on this. And like, no, we think everybody's going to agree with me. I'm like, really? Because I put a poll up on LinkedIn. And after a week, 88% agree with me that this should have been called the Microsoft 365 Developers Toolkit or Development Toolkit, because that's more descriptive of what this is for. Imagine somebody brand new coming, hey, I want to build a tab for a Teams team. It's already a stupid way to say it. Already a stupid naming that they chose there. How do I do that? Oh, you use the Agents Toolkit. No. I don't want to do anything with AI. I don't want to build a bot or anything like that. I just want to go through and build a tab. Yeah, you still use this over here. What if I want to build an add-in for Microsoft Word that just lets me go through, or Excel, and lets me modify some of the stuff in the spreadsheet? Oh, use the Agents Toolkit. No. There's no AI involved. I just want to build a tab for Excel to manage content in a spreadsheet with no AI. Yeah, you still use the Agents Toolkit. It's just such a, I mean, this is so transparently a marketing thing that some executive is like, we need to put agents on everything because we have to validate our investment in AI. So again, this is just stupid with no thought about what the developer experience is going to be. They also renamed that test tool that we have inside of the toolkit. It's now called the Microsoft 365 Agents Playground. Big whoop, no big deal. One of the things that was challenging, we experienced this firsthand in my class that I was teaching. I know one of you was in it at the time that I see who's in the chat. A bunch of the templates have changed. So most specifically, the one that was like the big kick in the teeth was they replaced the Bot Framework v4 with the Microsoft 365 Agents SDK, which and they did it in most of the templates. Some of the templates they didn't. I like the new Agents SDK. What I don't like though is they went GA with it, and there's a JavaScript SDK for it, but there's no documentation for it. Now I've talked to the engineering team over there, and they're like, we plan on releasing the JavaScript docs for the Agents SDK within a matter of weeks. And that was like 2 or 3 weeks ago. So my hope is that we'll see it by the end of June. Maybe we'll see it by the end of July, worst case. But they've committed to, like, they are going to make changes. And since I asked them, I've noticed, I'm watching the source code in the repo, and you can see they're definitely making a lot of improvements. They're making a lot of progress with the docs. But I mean, if you're going to go GA with something with the different SDKs, you just give one SDK. I mean, especially if you're going through and renaming all the or changing all the templates we have. I mean, you got to give us documentation. So I don't know. It was really frustrating when it happened. Let's see. Yeah, I hear you, Don. Don says, we asked them not to name everything Copilot, so now so instead they named everything agents. Exactly. Here's another one. This one was kind of a blind side to me. And frankly, I think this is also kind of dumb. So in the past, if you had a personal tab, if you had a tab that was in a personal tab, which meant that it could be pinned on the left-hand side, the only scope that it supported, there's 3 scopes. There's personal, teams, or team, and group chat. So team is like a channel, and then group chat. The personal tabs, they only were allowed in the personal scope, and configurable tabs or channel tabs and group chat tabs were only available in the team or the group chat scope or. But it's changed. Now, a personal tab can also be in the team of the group chat, which means I can add a tab without a configuration page popping up. You're like, oh, so that's kind of nice. Except if you have an app that has both a channel tab that's in the team or group chat scope and a static tab, and that static tab is in the team or group chat scope, you can't add the channel tab to a channel. You can't do it through the UX. The only way you can do it is if you write code using the Teams JavaScript SDK to get it added. I don't know about you guys. I think that's kind of stupid. I was like, that's intentional? They're like, oh yeah, this is by design. I'm like, that's stupid. So let me get this straight. If I have a personal tab, a personal app inside of a project, and I've got like bots or message extensions and channel tabs, I have to create my own admin interface in my personal app to get those channel tabs added to a channel. Not use that little plus icon at the top of a channel to get a tab inside that channel. That's not intuitive at all to an end user. Again, this is like when you talk to an engineer, they're like, oh, it makes perfect sense. I'm like, hey, how about your user? How about you get out of your little bubble and go talk to a user? So I had an issue. I created an issue about this in the Teams Toolkit repo, now the Agents Toolkit repo, and they're like, oh yeah, we didn't realize this. We forgot to document this, and oh wait, by the way, it's by design. Like, but what? So you don't consider that a bug in the experience? Like, no. Like, okay, I'm just the. I guess I'm just the messenger. So again, this is not a great month, right? This is like they're making all these decisions. I think are just really stupid over in the Microsoft 365 land, but I guess they don't really care too much about the experience. So I'd love to hear what you guys think who are joining me live for this. I see a handful of you are here. I mean, put in the chat, am I like off base? Am I kind of making mountains out of molehills? I don't know. It's just doesn't make sense. Okay, this one isn't bad. Finally, all the bad news is gone. So Microsoft 365 Copilot, I touched a little bit on this last time, but I can give you a little bit more info on it. I just spent a lot more time here. For connectors, this is where you can add unstructured content for your custom agents. They renamed those. They used to be called Microsoft Graph Connectors. They're now called Copilot Connectors. And there is a template in the Agents Toolkit, the ATK, to where you can do this. The other thing that they did is they've removed all of the limits associated with connectors. So before you could have like 50 million items across all your entire tenant for stuff. There's still some stuff in the documentation that implies this. There's still some documentation that implies there's limits. There is still stuff in the UX that implies there's limits. When I talked to Microsoft about this, trying to get clarification, they said the intent is that all limits are gone. So if you run into any of these limits, then you're supposed to like submit a ticket, and they will they'll like remove the limit from your account, from your tenant. I mean, it's kind of weird, but you got to document that stuff, don't you? I mean, people are making decisions based off that, and you're just saying like, oh no, I only heard about this from Andrew's office hours. Like, hey, I love that, but I mean, not everybody's here, so I don't know, just burying that stuff. Another thing that they did talk about is they are adding support for Model Context Protocol as an action runtime. That was discussed at Build. It's an upcoming private preview. I don't have the timeline on this. I am really beating down the door to make sure I can try and get into this, because I want to try this out and show people how to use this. I've talked to Microsoft about this and some of the implementation details. It's really early, but when I know more, you can bet I'll be talking about it some more. Another thing about this is with type spec. So that is another way to create declarative agents. So today when you create declarative agents, you do it with JSON, you do it with YAML. You have to create the declarative agent manifest, you have to create the actions manifest, and you have to create the OAD file, the Open API 3.0 description file for your endpoint if you don't already have one. What type spec is, think about type spec as like a domain specific language, a DSL. So if you've used Bicep to create ARM templates, it's like that. It is type spec is like is a DSL for generating manifests and API specification documents. It is, or you can think about it as like TypeScript that generates JavaScript, makes you more productive. Okay. I am a fan of this. I do like this more than the JavaScript and the YAML versions of going through and rolling this stuff out. It does look pretty good. I have a couple articles that are coming out about this in the next week or two. They were all going to come out this week, except this whole thing with field customizers getting canned. That kind of took my priority a bit, caught me off guard. But these will come out in the next few weeks. So I've got an article on one on what is TypeSpec and why did Microsoft use it? What is it supposed to solve? And then how does it work in the context of Copilot? Another one is that the template that we have for it today from the Agents Toolkit is not that great. It's not very, I don't think it's, if you want to add your own action, like using an Azure function, it's not easy to do. So the second one is how do you create a starter template to make this work using one of the existing templates? And then the third one is walking you through all the different pieces for this. So I was doing a little bit of this for my students of my last Teams Accelerator that wrapped up about a week or two ago, and done a bunch of research in this area. And I have a pretty good pattern for this. The cool thing is that when the article comes out, you'll see that a template that I create that I'll make available to you. You can download it. I've shared it with Microsoft and they love it. And I think it might actually become part of the Agents Toolkit in a future release. So they love it. I've given them a lot of feedback, found some bugs. They're very responsive to this. And I think it's a good thing going forward. So keep an eye on that. Speaking of all this Copilot stuff, I actually have a workshop coming up in about a month, actually just short of a month, a 2-day workshop on building declarative agents for Microsoft 365 Copilot. You can learn more about it at this link you see there at the bottom. This is going to be available to all of my students who have been through my Teams Accelerator. You will have access to this as well. It is a live workshop. I've done this in the past, but what's different about this one is that there will be a bunch of instructor-led self-paced demos for doing things like creating a Copilot connector using the new template. As well as creating a declarative agent and creating a declarative agent using TypeSpec, and creating the API and everything. So I'll walk through all of that stuff. Plus, it's like 2 days of there's 2 90-minute sessions on day 1 and 2 90-minute sessions on day 2 for this, and you'll get access to the on-demand course, like the self-paced course. You'll get access to that as well as part of your enrollment in this live workshop. So. Got some people have already registered for this already, but if you're interested in joining me, take a look at that and go ahead and register for that as well. I'll talk more about that kind of as over the next few weeks, but I'm looking forward to that workshop. All right, that's it. I wanted to get through everything before we started handling questions, so I got a couple questions along the way. I will, but I don't see any questions that have been posted here in the chat. If you've got a question, please feel free to post it in the chat. I'm more than happy to discuss any of this stuff that has come up. I do want to let you know before we wrap up here, though, or before I start, while I'm waiting for questions to come in. I guess just so far, just thank you very much for joining me. These are different places where you can find me. Find me on LinkedIn, on Blue Sky, on YouTube, and then also where you can also find my new podcast, CodeDeployGo.live is where you'll find it. And the next office hours are going to be on Tuesday, July the 15th, same time, 11 a.m. Eastern time. It's not up on my YouTube channel just yet. If you are, but it will be in the next day or so. I'll have it up. I'll have that posted shortly. So with that, I guess anybody have any questions? We got a good 21 minutes left here that we can just kind of riff on anything. I see, let's see, what is it? I see, Don, I saw you say, shouldn't APIs be self-documenting? I mean, in one sense, kind of, yes. But the challenge that we were facing with this, okay, so let me explain that really quick. So the challenge we were facing with the API, and I think when you add this question, you asked it when I was talking about the JavaScript SDK for the agents SDK, the M365 Agents SDK. In the context of this, what the thing that we were having trouble with when I was teaching the last accelerator was that when you looked at the source code, so remember, there's an API, but when you don't have, let me say it like this. At the time they made the change, you didn't have any sample. There was one sample. They've added a lot more since then. There was one sample, and the only way you could really figure out how to use stuff with this is to kind of go into the source code. If you tried to use their API, you would have found multiple ways to do the same thing. And when I say multiple, I mean two. That's still multiple. One way was using kind of, I'm just going to call it a new pattern, which feels more like how we did bots with the Teams AI Library v1. Don't get me started. Well, you can get me started on the Teams AI Library v2 if you want, but that's still in preview, and I would not bank on that for now. But if you look at the Teams, if you look at if you look at how they did that stuff, it was a lot of on the v1. The Agents Toolkit had a way that you could create bots the same way. I like the way they did that. The thing that was confusing though is that all of the bot framework way of doing it was also in there. And so it's kind of hard, but you couldn't just do like a simple code, like say delete the bot framework and let me just go through and use the Agents Toolkit, and all my existing code that used the bot framework will still work. That didn't work. It wasn't clear which one we were supposed to use, and if the new one was like, is that really the way we're supposed to be going with it? Because you have the old stuff there, and it looks like the old stuff is how we're also supposed to be doing it. So which one should we be doing here? They didn't do a good job of really, it wasn't very clear in the SDK. I had a question into them in their issue list or in the discussion point, had a bunch of questions about it. And that's where they told me, yeah, the SDK is going to be available in the next few weeks. And then they said, well, when I looked at it, they're like, it sounds like you caught us in the middle of a refactoring, because when I went back and looked, I can see that a lot of stuff's been cleaned up. So should an API be self-documenting? Yes, if it's done. But this was my gripe to them, which is, you guys said this was GA, and this feels more like a release candidate or a holy crap, builds tomorrow, we better sit there and start publishing stuff. Looks like they came in pretty darn hot. So it'll get better. But yeah, I've got a ton of samples that I have to rebuild, and videos I got to redo. One of you that's in the office hours, Savvy, I see you here. Like I got a bunch of stuff on a backlog that I got to get sorted. I'm still like there in flux, and so I'm kind of in flux on like how much time where do I invest the time for this, and to go through and to update these different samples based on what they have. And if they're so close on the docs, I'm kind of like, I'm just going to wait until your docs are done, because it's going to be easier to go through and to understand this stuff and make sure that I give the right guidance, because their docs may come out and say some other stuff on guidance on how to use it, and that may contradict something that I've said. And it's like, oh, well, now that I know that makes it a little bit different. So, and I would rather, selfishly, I would rather not go through and like take the time to figure something out and build it out, and then realize and record a video and share it with a bunch of students, and then find out 3 days later that, hey, everything is different. And I should be doing it in a different way. Furthermore, that's just the selfish side of me, but on the student side, you don't want to go learn something and then find out 2 days later what you just learned is not relevant, and you should be doing it a different way. So that's why I'm kind of like, I owe my students that were in that cohort an update for a bunch of samples, but I also don't want to just give you an update just to check off a box and say, there's the update, because it's a considerable amount of work, and I want to make sure that I give you what I've given them today. Everything still works. Bot framework still works. So that's kind of where I am with this. Yeah, and you say no wonder Vesa went on sabbatical. So Vesa Juvonen for Microsoft is on I think an 8-week sabbatical that started last week or 2 weeks ago. Yeah, he left right before, well, quite frankly, in terms of like these retirement notices and all that stuff and deprecation notices, as far as I'm concerned, like Vesa left right before the shit hit the fan. So I guess that's good. Sorry for the language, but that's kind of how I feel. That's not kind of how I feel. That's how I feel. I'm like lost a lot of faith in Microsoft from an M365 development perspective. Yeah. Oh, okay, here we go. Pete says, you're trying to add RSC permissions to a SharePoint Framework Teams app. Not sure it's the right place or time for the question, but do you know if you can create an app registration approved permissions? Okay, so good question, Pete. So first of all, so the fact that you're using SPFx for this is kind of irrelevant, right? That's not going to matter. You can use RSC in this context. First of all, I would recommend you not use the SharePoint Framework to build your Teams app. There's so many little edge cases where stuff doesn't work, but let's set that aside for a second. So feel free to ask a follow-up on that. What you're going to have to do to implement your RSC permissions, you will not be setting up those permissions as like a permission request inside the SharePoint Admin Center. So you won't be adding it as a permission the way you do with like SharePoint Framework stuff, because that is only going to apply to SharePoint Online. That does not apply to Teams. The way you're going to do the permissions for RSC for your Teams app is you do that in the Teams app manifest. So if you're relying on the SharePoint Online app catalog to generate your app manifest for you on the fly by saying that this works in Teams, then that's not going to work, because you're going to have to put the RSC permissions. You're going to have to put those inside of the Teams app, not inside the Teams app manifest, not inside anything inside of a SharePoint. So what that means is that in your SPFx solution that has a Teams tab or has a web part that's going to act as a Teams tab, you're going to have to go in and create your own app manifest. And if you look at the docs, I can pull it up really quick if I can find it real quick, but there's a place where you have to create the Teams app package. So you have to create the manifest and the two images, zip them up and give it a very specific name and have that get included in your SPFx on your SharePoint package, the SPPKG file that gets uploaded to the app catalog. And then SharePoint Online won't create that on the fly. They'll instead use the one you gave it when it goes to install it over inside of Teams. And when it does that, that's when you're adding those RSC permissions, right? So you don't do it. None of this has anything to do with SharePoint or any of the SharePoint infrastructure. Hopefully that answers your question, Pete. You will have to have an app registration. You absolutely will have to have an app registration for this. And that's just as a standard like Teams app thing. And what's going to be tricky about that is that you can't do that from a SPFx package. So you're going to have to do that as a separate step. That's why there's a lot of reasons why I really dislike using SharePoint Framework web parts for Teams development. I would instead, if you're going to have like a web part, if you're going to have a UX and you want it to work in both solutions, instead, I would create the solution, no SharePoint, no Teams dependencies. I would create it in its own project, its own package, like an NPM package. And then I would have your SharePoint solution would be a web part, and that SharePoint solution takes a dependency on that NPM package, pulls it in, and then that web part just loads that web app. So hopefully it's like a React app, and you pass any input parameters or any of that kind of stuff into it. On the Teams side, I would then create a Teams project, and it does the same thing, and it would load in that UX into that component. I would not try and have the web part work over on the Teams side. I mean, technically you can make it work, and technically Microsoft says that they support it, but there's so many little things that I've seen just break randomly, and then they'll start working again. And frankly, when you file a bug, the Teams engineering team is like, this has nothing to do with Teams. This is a SharePoint thing. Talk to SharePoint. You talk to SharePoint, they're like, well, we can't get the Teams guys to get this one thing to work, and we're trying to get everything fixed. Now you get like, these two guys are kind of like the Teams group and the SharePoint group. It's like they're fighting and they don't work for the same company, and nobody takes responsibility for it. So it takes forever, first of all, to get Microsoft to pay attention to issues like this. Second of all, it's even like an act of God to get them to actually fix this stuff when it comes up. So I tell everybody, stay far away from this. You say it's a legacy code base with web parts for SharePoint and a Teams tab, but writing some capabilities for a meeting. Get the manifest and everything set. Got the manifest and everything set up already. Okay. I mean, if it's still legacy, I would still, if you're already doing a lot of work there and you're trying, I think, in my opinion, it's more work to try and retrofit the existing solution to get it to work. I personally wouldn't try and stress it too much, but I mean, it's up to you. It's totally up to you. I'm just not a fan of going this approach. because it's just too much. Feels like it's like trying to push water up a hill. Like even if it's in a cube, it's still tough, or even a circle or sphere. Cool. All right, I've got like 10 minutes left. Anybody have any other questions? If not, no sense in just kind of dragging this out just to drag it out. Any questions, anybody? I don't see any questions. Okay. Well, with that, why don't we wrap it up? Okay, so just as a quick little rehash, little reminder here, the next office hours is in July, on July the 15th, Tuesday, July the 15th at 11 a.m. I hope to see you there. If you are interested and you want to check out my workshop that's coming up on doing stuff with declarative agents and Microsoft 365 for Microsoft 365 Copilot, including learning how to build your declarative agent using TypeSpec, take a look at that. I will have some articles that also kind of explain some stuff with TypeSpec, and we'll spend a lot more time on that over the next, I'd say, week or two. Tune into my podcast tomorrow, Code Deploy Go.live will be out tomorrow, episode 8, where Julie and I, let's say, fly off the handle. There was some stuff that was definitely cut from some things we said, but it is where we will talk about the SPFx deprecation of and pending retirement of field customizers. And with that, that's everything I got for you guys. So thank you very much for showing up today, and I hope to see you in a future office hours. Thanks a lot, everybody.